I am going to jump in to the topic of storytelling by taking you back to the mid 60s, where my 8-year-old self stood by the side of the pool, petrified to get in and take my first swimming lesson. The pool was located in the cavernous basement of a very old YMCA building, like built in the early 1900s. The dank, dark smell of the place just was really repulsive to me. The sounds of all the kids laughing and talking echoed off the walls, just made me feel very small and unready to be in that place. The deep end terrified me. Meanwhile, my two sisters had already jumped in the water and were splashing and laughing, having fun with other kids. I sat on the side of the pool and dipped my toes in and really did not want to jump in the water. But the instructor came over and coaxed me in, and I managed to get through that first lesson, but I did not really enjoy it. I could barely stand on the deep end. I had to tip my head up to keep my nose above water. And when the kids splashed, it made me very nervous. But needless to say, I got through that first class. But when I got home, I found my parents in the living room where they had retreated to read the paper, which is something they did every night. And the living room was a place in our house where we could not go in there and play, make messes, and be loud. It was a place where serious conversations took place, and it was my parents' retreat. So I made my case, begging to quit swimming lessons. And both my parents simultaneously look over the top of their paper and they say, "You don't have to sign up again, but you have to finish your classes." So the next week, I piled into the neighbor's station wagon to carpool down to the swimming pool with a big group of other neighbor kids. And the classes went a little better. And my mom came to pick us up at the end. And I think when she came in and saw how big and overwhelming that pool was, she understood why I was feeling intimidated. It did not change her resolve that I had to finish those lessons, but I think knowing that she understood helped me a little bit. So I kept going. I finished the tadpole class, and then I signed up for minnow. I finished minnow, and eventually, over a course of the years, I finished the whole YMCA swimming lesson series. And in the end, I was able to swim the laps required to pass the junior life-saving exam. And in that exam, I also had to rescue a teacher who faked drowning. And we had to tip over a canoe wearing jeans and heavy sweatshirts and then tread water while we took those clothes off and swim the canoe to the shore. After I finished all of those skills, looking back to my scared self at the very beginning of those courses, I never could have imagined that I would be able to finish all those tasks. And from this day forward, every time I think about quitting something, I'm transported back to my parents' living room and their message: you have to finish what you start. We're going to come back and dissect this story a few different times throughout this session. But before we talk more about the story, I would like to give you a sense of what we're going to do today. I'm going to give you a method for telling stories, 1, 2, 3 steps. We're going to give you a chance to start thinking about your leadership stories, looking through your life, and what are your leadership values? What are the stories behind those values? Chances are, if something you feel really strongly about something, like I feel about quitting, there is perhaps something that happened to you, like my swimming lessons, that have formed and shaped that value. And then we're going to have you work on turning some of those stories into 6-word versions. Now, some materials that you might need: grab a piece of paper or a journal, something that you'll be able to write with, because you're going to be doing some reflective activities. And lastly, I invite you to just look around your space that you're in right now and grab an artifact that inspires you. It might be a picture, a statue, a knickknack, but some object that has some meaning to you. And I think today I'm going to grab this little figurine that was given to me by one of my mentees. We had just concluded a year of working together, and she wrote a very lovely note and gave me this statue, telling me how much I had helped her with a significant career and life transition. This artifact might serve as a muse. It might bring into focus one of your leadership stories, one of your leadership values. If it doesn't, it'll just be something that gives you a little bit of joy while we're going through our session. Just full disclosure, I published a book a year ago. It's called Once Upon an Innovation. And we'll be using some of the techniques from the book, but I have also created some new tools that I'm going to be beta testing with you today. So you get material from the book plus more. All right, well, I didn't really tell you a lot about myself, but I am by formal training, registered dietitian, and I have my master's degree in exercise science. I spent the first decade of my career doing wellness programming, eventually found my way into the field of health and nutrition communications, landed at General Mills, where I worked for 13 years, doing a lot of work in the innovation space, applying health information, health communications to help the brands innovate around health messaging. Then 9 years ago, I got laid off / retired out of General Mills, and that was my opportunity to start storytelling. So what I'm going to share with you is a little bit of my journey into this space around storytelling. I've had a lot of passion for storytelling. In fact, I stumbled into it back when I did wellness counseling and realized that all of my facts and information about health and nutrition couldn't help people change their lives unless I understood their story. What was going on inside their lives, and what were some of the emotional barriers that kept them in their old space and prevented them from moving on to a newer, healthier lifestyle. But also, being a scientist, I like evidence. So when I came across this work from a neuroscientist by the name of Paul Zak that showed that a good story actually changes brain chemistry, I got really excited about the potential of bringing storytelling into my work as an innovation consultant. So what Zak was, it was an accidental discovery for him. He was studying the neuroscience of trust. And in that process, he found that in response to a good narrative, that the brain released more of a hormone called oxytocin. Anyone who's been involved in childbirth, either as a mother giving birth or a father watching it, you probably learned that oxytocin just floods the mother's body after childbirth. And it's often called the love hormone. Oxytocin is associated with compassion, empathy, and trust. And what Dr. Zak found is that a person can't just say, oh, I'm going to tell you a story and start waxing on and stringing together a series of events and a bunch of facts. There have to be 3 key elements in order for the brain to release oxytocin. A character who struggles against an obstacle and experiences an emotional transformation that leads that character to a new understanding or truth. The character doesn't necessarily have to overcome that obstacle, but during that struggle, there will be that aha moment where the light bulb goes off and the problem switches from a struggle to clarity and resolution. So for our purposes today, we're going to use this definition of a story: a character who struggles against an obstacle, experiences an emotional transformation that leads to a new understanding or truth. All right, so the 1, 2, 3 steps to storytelling. Step 1 is to mine for story gems. And story gems are raw story ideas. They have the potential of turning into a story, but they may or may not really have all that it takes to develop into a story. But it's really important to capture all your gems. This is your brainstorming step. And then number 2, to develop the plot and the meaning. And number 3, to polish with salient details. Now we're going to hit briefly on all 3 of these. We're going to focus most of our time on helping you find your story gems, your leadership story gems. To help get you started, I'm going to introduce you to Annette Simmons. Annette Simmons was my guru and mentor when I got into business storytelling. Annette was one of the forerunners in this space. She got involved in business storytelling in about the mid-90s and published her first book, The Story Factor, in 2001. Her book has gone on and influenced many others who've also written books and pursued this space. And almost everyone touches a little bit on one key framework that she introduces. And that's 6 stories she believes you need to learn how to tell to influence and persuade others. The first story is a who I am story. It's a story that makes you human. Maybe it's a story about a mistake you made, or a hard lesson that you learned, or something that formed your character. The second story is a why I'm here story. Tightly related to a who I am story, a why I'm here reveals why you're in the role that you're in, or why you're showing up in this role today. The third type of story is a vision story. Visionary leaders do this naturally. Conjure in your mind someone who you think is a really visionary leader and reflect for a bit and start watching his or her behavior to notice how they naturally weave stories in, because stories help people imagine a future that's different than today's reality. And that's what it takes to get people excited to work for a future state, because now they can imagine what that future state might be and how it will be better. The fourth type of story is our values in action. The easiest way to teach a value is to role model it. The second easiest way is to tell a story about it. And as leaders, you all have your values. Whether or not you're aware of those values, you have them. And chances are there's a story underneath those values that help that be solidified for you. Whether you're apoplectic when people are late, or you're enthusiastic when everyone collaborates, there's something in your background that caused that to be a really core value in how you want to lead and how you want others to work with you. The fifth type of story is teaching and simplifying. A story can simplify complex information and leave a memorable impression. So instead of having to memorize, they're left with this imprint of a story. And the sixth type of story Annette calls I know what you're thinking. And it's sort of like naming the elephant in the room without naming the elephant. You can tell a story that defines that tension or that anxiety that everyone's feeling and no one wants to talk about. And when you say what everyone else is thinking, you just see the shoulders relax and people can now go on and do their work. So let's come back to my little swimming lesson story. And I want you to just reflect for a few minutes. Did you hear any of those 6 stories inside my swimming lesson episode? What I'd like you to do is use the annotate function. And in case you haven't used that on Zoom, you go to view options. So hover around on the top of your screen till you see view options come up on the bar. And then click down, and the drop-down menu, select Annotate. And then this new bar will pop up, and I want you to my clicker's not working. Pick the stamp feature, and then just pick whatever symbol you like, an X, a heart, whatever, and just stamp next to all the stories that you heard inside my swimming lesson story. Okay, who I am, why I'm here, inspiring a vision, values and action. Yep. And there's no right or wrong to this. Everyone hears different stories. Okay, people even thought that I simplified something complex. Okay, I chose this story because I think it's one of my core leadership values. I struggled really hard a year ago when I was volunteering with a professional organization. The team was highly dysfunctional and there were some really toxic things going on. And I wanted so badly to quit, but I ended up sticking it out. And a lot of it was because my parents' message about finishing what I start is just so deeply ingrained. All right, Tracy, would you clear that for me? well, actually I can erase it. Oh no, wait, I don't have the, can you erase the, on that bar, if you have the bar up, just erase it and we'll move on.
Yeah, I'm not sure I know where to go for that.
Okay, let me do it then.
I tried and I cannot. So it's got to be a presenter thing or
Annotate.
And you should be in your annotation toolbar. You should see clear and then clear all.
Yep, we're there. I got it. All right, so what I'd like to do now is give you a chance to reflect on your leadership values and start to find some story gems. So I put this tool together for you using kind of a play, theater type of metaphor, because you know you're going to be the star of your own play. So use this tool and just see if it triggers any leadership values. You know, if you were to come up with your marquee, what would be an overarching statement? Or can you think of any stories that have really defined who you are? And then think about your muse. In other words, why do you work? What gives you that energy? Where do you get that inner burn from? And how does that inner burn kind of express itself? How might others see that in you? And then your fame. What is it that you want to be known for? How do you want to be valued? And then your comedy. What energizes you? And your tragedy. What drains you? Sometimes we learn more about who we are by what we hate. There's something that makes you apoplectic. Chances are, on the other side of that is something that you value so deeply that when others are violating that value, you're really going crazy. Okay? And I'd be happy to put this tool in the Slack afterwards if you think you want to be able to come back to it. All right, so take a couple minutes. And I'm hoping that everyone has at least one story gem that they've been able to find, either from reflecting on Annette's 6-story framework or using that in combination with this tool. So our goal is at least one story gem. If you've come up with 5 or 10, hey, you're really humming. Okay, any questions in the chat that I should address now?
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but anyone is welcome to type it in or to unmute themselves and start their video.
there was a lot of appreciation for introducing folks to annotation.
Oh, good. Great. I'm glad I taught you something about Zoom. I use it all the time. It's a great way to interact with a large group of people when you don't have time to let people on mute. So great. I'm glad you like that. All right. Well, let's move on then to step 2, developing the plot and the meaning. This is probably the hardest step in coming up with a good story, and it's a skill that takes a little bit of time to master, but I'm going to give you a quick introduction to it anyway. I like to go back to the narrative arc that we were all introduced to in our English classes throughout the years, where there's the set the stage, the rising tension, the climax, sometimes called turning point, the resolution, and then the meaning or the lesson that comes out of it. And then there's beyond this emotional transformation. There's a journey that the character's gone through. I like to think of it, that was then, this is now. What happened in between? Okay. So this character was going through a struggle. And at each effort that they make to work through that problem or that struggle, it gets even more intense. They keep finding more obstacles. And then something happens where the situation flips from being a struggle to it coming into clarity and there being some resolution. And on the other side, look back and life is different because of that little journey. And this is where the magic of empathy comes in. If a story is told well, the listener goes through that character's journey and they feel what the character felt. And that's why they feel the empathy. So I think stories have so much power in innovation. User stories, competitor stories, stakeholder stories, all these different opportunities that we're wanting to change and push change forward. It really helps if we can package what we're trying to convince people to do in a compelling story so that they have empathy and they can see the opportunity. Okay, so to help you further understand this tool for plot analysis, I'm going to go back to my swimming lesson story and I'm going to break it down for you visually. So we start in this dark, dank, scary swimming pool. My 8-year-old self didn't want to get in the water, but my sisters jump in, making me feel even more awkward and embarrassed and left out. And there I am, like just hardly able to keep my head above water. I get through that lesson, but it was not fun. And there I am then in the living room. Please, please let me quit. And my parents deliver their famous line, "You must finish what you start." Eventually, it got easier. I learned skills. I ended up passing the most advanced swimming test. And because of that, I've had a lifetime of enjoying water safely. So the last thing that I like to do with this tool is put the lessons learned and how I will apply it underneath the arc. I like to use this way of diagramming my story plots rather than outlining, because as soon as I start Roman numeral 1, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, I'm going into analytical pathways. I'm categorizing things. I'm thinking more logically, and I'm shutting down my imagination, where a visual tool helps me stay in a more imaginative and creative space. So I share this tool with you as a way to begin to think about your story plot. Now, the third step we're going to touch on even more briefly, but put some ideas in the chat about what were some of the salient details that you heard when I told the story. And by salient details, I mean describing characters and settings through all 5 senses. As humans, we tend to default to just describe what we see. But if you can talk about how something smells or tastes or feels, people are getting a more visceral response and they're feeling themselves in that setting. So any words that were heard?
In the chat, we've got dank, dark, smells, sounds, colors.
Yeah, okay. So just a little exposure to that. But anyway, that's the third step. And now what I want to bring you on to are the 6-word stories. So urban legend has it that Ernest Hemingway was challenged in a Paris bar one night. Can you write a 6-word story? He accepted the challenge and went away and wrote, "For sale, baby shoes, never worn." He won his bet and he claims it was his best story. Now again, the validity of this has been a little bit challenged, but it is an urban legend. Whether or not it's true, this challenge started a whole movement around trying to write a story in 6 words. It's a very useful tool during innovation. If you've collected a lot of user stories, we learned earlier this morning about empathy mapping and writing personas. If you can then write your more in-depth one, but headline it with 6 words, what the 6 words do is they pique curiosity in your listener and they beg them to ask for more. So we look at this 6-word story of Ernest Hemingway's, "For sale, baby shoes, never worn." And we're wondering, did the baby die? Or was it just a 10-pound baby that was too big for those shoes when it came out of the womb? Or maybe the shoes were too big when the baby was born and they got packed away and the parents were busy and sleep deprived, and a year later they pulled the shoes out and the baby was too big for the shoes, so they were never worn. We don't know. We're left with those questions. Okay. So if we were to try to put my swimming lesson story into 6 words, this was one that I came up with. Sinking Girl, Stern Parents, Lessons Learned. Now, if you want to go back and use annotate again, you can, or just put it in the chat. If you have any other 6-word versions of my story for me, pass them on to me, and I'll grab them later in chat because I'm afraid we're going to run out of time. Someone like that. All right, so then what I want you to do now is whiteboard your 6-word leadership story. So take one of your gems, and try to come up with a 6-word version of it. And to do that, again, you go back to annotate, but instead of using the stamp feature, you're going to use the text tool. And then this pulls up a text and you can just start typing in.
And Jean, we're approaching the end of our last 5 minutes. So they might want to meet up with you in Wonder Me.
Chat. Okay. So I just wanted to share that my final gift is that my book is on a spring special, which expires in a few days, but you can take advantage of it if you're interested. I can also put this up on the Slack, if that's okay. Is that okay to put something like that there? Okay. And you can buy it at Itasca Books with the coupon, and I can't give discounts through Amazon, but it is available there as well. And also visit me online. There's a free downloadable PDF that has the whole 1, 2, 3 steps explained in more detail and some other free resources. And I'll just conclude with my favorite quote. A picture's worth 1,000 words, and a story is worth 1,000 pictures. Thank you very much for spending time with me.
I like that. I've never heard that one before.
Yeah, I can't say I made it up, but it really is powerful. Okay, I'll see you in Wonder Me.
All right, thank you so much. Now, everyone in the chat, I put in the link to Wonder Me. It's u10.me/wonder, and I ran into Jean this morning in Wonder Me in the red room, so I know it's working well. And so you just want to move your little icon of yourself over to the red room and find Jean and come close to her, and then you'll be in the same bubble and you'll be able to see and hear each other. And multiple people can all do that. So that's it. If you would evaluate this session, you go to u10.me/survey. There's also a link in the chat. And the 05 Career Development is the channel where Jean will be, and any other panelists who are speaking about career development, including mentoring. So thank you again, Jean, and thanks to everyone. There is another session in this room that starts at 12:35 Eastern on OKRs. So you are welcome to join there. There's going to be a new session moderator there named Faith. And there is some questions in the chat, and Jean, I'll just ask you to take those questions over to Wonder Me. And so let me see, somebody had asked, expand on what you mean about know what you were thinking and provide an example.
Okay.
And then someone else said, love how this aligns with what I think of as my secret power as character and script breakdown from a prior career, validation for the win. So there you go. You're getting a lot of great presentation, a lot of thank you. And where's the link for evaluating UTing? That is under u10.me/survey, where you can provide feedback for Jean's session. And someone else says, thank you, Jean. Loved this.
Great.
So thank you, Jean. I love storytelling. It's very powerful. I love what you said about the oxytocin. Very interesting. And I look forward to watching the replay of this to further digest everything, and seeing you over in Slack and Wonder Me.
Thank you so much. All right, I'll see you over at Wonder Me.
All right, thank you.